What's going on, everybody? For those of you that don't know me, my name is Andrew and I am the professional landlord. With April 1st now behind us, I am happy and relieved to say that most tenants paid their rent as usual. A lot of landlords were worried about not getting that rental income with all the craziness taking place because of the coronavirus. But we actually collected from almost 80% of the tenants within just the first 3 days of the month, which is pretty normal for our portfolio. So on the surface, it seems like most rents are being paid and people are trying to meet their obligations, and all that is good. But in this video, I want to talk about the percentage of landlords that aren't so lucky and didn't collect their rent for April. Now, the main difference between this month and any other are 1, the need to create payment plans without going through the landlord and tenant board, and 2, the inability to follow through with existing evictions, and that includes also hearings that are in motion or are waiting to be in motion. So what are landlords supposed to do about this? Let's talk about payment plans. Now, we don't usually make payment plans in this fashion, mostly because of how difficult it is to enforce these plans if they haven't been made through the tribunal. But under the circumstances, we have to make do with what we've got. So when a tenant first contacts you about not being able to pay the rent, you want to first establish why they can't pay the rent, how much they can't pay, and what kind of arrangement are they willing to make. When you ask them, they're probably going to say something to the effect of that they've been laid off, their spouse has been laid off, or they can't go to work because of school closures. The first thing you want to do is direct them to the proper resources. Your tenant may have already applied for employment insurance, but if they haven't, EI has been a little bit overloaded right now, so you might want to start looking into something like the emergency response benefit that is being released soon. This benefit will offer individuals who are out of work a total of about $2,000 per month, which is taxable, and this will go on for about 4 months. Now keep in mind that in order to apply for this online, you need to have a CRA account, so you might want to advise your tenant to get that going if they haven't already. So the next thing to do is you want to establish how much they're coming short. So you want to see if you can negotiate at least some kind of partial payment. It's usually not the case that the tenant can't pay anything, so try to negotiate something reasonable. Out of the 72 tenants we have on payment plans, most of them were able to come up with at least 50% of the rent to start. They should be able to catch up with the rents over the next few months if all goes well. Most of our payment plans look a little something like this. For April, they should be paying 50% of the rent. Come May, they should be paying 125%. And then for June, another 125%, then they should be good to go. Now we have had a few circumstances where we've had to make some variations to these type of arrangements, maybe extending them to as long as 6 months. And depending on each individual's financial circumstances, you as a landlord want to be extremely realistic about what you can expect that tenant to do. If for whatever reason you're not able to come to something viable for both you and the tenant, it doesn't mean that you should stop trying to work together. Try to create a win-win situation as much as possible, and maybe this is the time to start thinking outside the box. For example, one of our tenants on a payment plan happens to be a painter. We had him give us a very reasonable quote to paint all the common areas of the apartment building that he's living in, and we applied his labor costs to the rent in conjunction with a payment plan. It's an investment to the property and improves the tenant's place of living. Win-win for both. Before any landlord starts getting a little bit too creative with this, please remember not to ask your tenants to be doing work that they shouldn't be if they're not licensed and they're not insured, because it can open the doors to all kinds of liabilities that none of us really have the time and don't want the headaches for. So now that we've talked a little bit about that, what about those who had an LTB matter or an eviction that was already in motion? Ideally, you still want to try to work something out with your tenant, because really there's no tribunal that you can go and attend to anymore. So maybe you might want to visit or revisit that cash for keys option. But understandably, and considering the circumstances, the trust between you and your tenant is usually no longer there at this point, so you really want to start preparing by looking at your own personal options, since you might be carrying the cost for a few months until things normalize. I advise getting a little bit cash heavy if possible to ride out the storm. Try applying to the same things that you would tell your tenant to apply for and more. Take advantage of all the credits and subsidies and deferrals that might be available to you. Start by isolating some of your highest loose debts and call those companies and try to negotiate a better rate or a deferral plan. You could also try calling your bank and see what kind of relief options they have available, and maybe even check in on that mortgage deferral program. You want to start lining up any LLCs, HELOCs, or anything else that can help you start carrying things over to ride this whole thing out, because you don't want to find yourself in a position where you might have to fold on your real estate during a time like this. So even if you don't think you need help right now, start looking into things, because things can always change. And a few other things I want people to keep in mind is you should be communicating with your tenants proactively, even if they did pay the rent on time this month. May will be the first month where people have been unemployed continuously for at least 30 days prior. So don't wait for them to call you and tell you that they can't pay. Reach out to them and maintain communications. And in case it isn't obvious, any arrangement that you do make should be clearly outlined in the agreement and signed by both parties. Always check and see what subsidies your local government is offering to help with your situation. It'll be beneficial to both you and your tenant. Anyway, I know that there are actually so many variations to the circumstances landlords might be facing during this crisis, but I do hope that I answer some of the most common questions out there. Let me know if you have a situation that is different or unique in any way, and if you've been successful in dealing with these things. Please make sure to share that story with us by leaving a comment in the comments below. So I do hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and follow us on our socials. Make sure to tune in weekly and learn how you can be a professional landlord. See you in the next one.